His mom found his head in a bucket. Shad Rocktherian was born on September 7th of 1997 in Green Bay, Wisconsin. His friends and family would describe him as a gentle soul. He was someone who was always thinking about other people first before himself. On February 21st of 2022, around 9:30 p.m., Shad was picked up from his mom's house by a girl named Taylor Shabusiness, who he had a sexual relationship with. They went to an apartment along with a friend, and they all did substances together. Shad and Taylor went back to his mom's house since no one else was at the home. The two went down to the basement so that they could spend some alone time together. As part of the romantic roleplay between the two, Taylor started strangling Shad with metal chains and didn't stop even though he was coughing up blood. And she continued with this even after he died, which took 3 to 5 minutes. Even though Taylor has just ended Shad's life, she continues to SA him for several hours. The following morning, Taylor dismembers Shad's body. Taylor dumps the blood down the shower drain. She takes out his organs and puts them in Ziploc bags and then places his head in a bucket. 2 days later, on February 23rd, Shad's mom hears the front door close, so she goes down to the basement to see if he's still there or if he left with Taylor. When she goes downstairs to the basement, she finds her son's head in a bucket that had been covered with a towel. Once police were called to the home, they were investigating the bucket, and alongside with finding his head, they also found his private part in there as well. As police continued to search the basement, they found his organs in Ziploc bags, and they also found other body parts just scattered around the basement. Later that day, police located Taylor in an apartment complex, and as they were searching her minivan, they found Shad's body parts inside of it. While in court, Taylor's attorney tried to submit a not guilty by reason of insanity plea. A couple of months later, Taylor was back in court and she attacked her attorney, and that attorney told the judge that he no longer wanted to be associated with Taylor or the case. September 26 of 2023, Taylor was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole and was given an extra 18 years. Earlier this year, Taylor's legal team tried to file an appeal, but it was very short-lived, so hopefully she never gets out.
She was rich, famous, and dated a king, but behind closed doors, her life was a nightmare. And her killer was the last person you'd ever expect. It was coming up to Christmas in 1986 in Los Angeles. Susan Cabot was a very well-known Hollywood actress. She was literally such a rags to riches story. She'd had a really sad start to her life. Her mum had really bad mental health and she'd been admitted to a mental health institution. And Susan was abused in all sorts of different ways during her childhood and ended up in foster care. She got married when she was literally still just a child to like a family friend, but this meant she could finally get out of foster care and have some kind of independence. And things started to spiral in her career in a good way. She got very small sort of extra parts in films and TV and things, and then it just started to snowball. She was getting bigger and bigger roles. She became this huge star in some blockbuster films. She was rubbing shoulders with rich, famous celebrities, one of which just so happened to be the King of Jordan. By this point, she just divorced her first husband, and when she met the King of Jordan, she was like, oh my god, this guy is the most charming guy I've ever met. She felt like it was the perfect opportunity to have a romance with somebody else. Things between the pair just grew and grew, and eventually she got pregnant. In 1964, she gave birth to her child Timothy. Susan, as I said, she'd had this really hard upbringing, and she was really still struggling with that with her mental health. She had a lot of trauma, and when Timothy was born, things got worse. He was struggling too. He was incredibly poorly. He suffered from seizures. He had to take medications which eventually gave him neurological problems. And she was never sort of properly with the King of Jordan. She actually did get remarried to a different guy, and her new husband did help, bless him, with raising Timothy. But sadly, that relationship ended too, and Susan was back to square one and just again really struggling. She was just finding life so hard. I mean, on the surface, she looked like this rich, successful actress, but her home life was totally opposite to what you'd expect. Her house was filthy. She wasn't looking after herself properly. She didn't want to go out and do anything. She was seeing a therapist, and she actually told her therapist that her son was the only one keeping her alive. But that changed in the most dramatic way on the 10th of December. Police raced over to the house that night and found Susan in an absolute bloodbath. She was lying dead in her home in her nightgown, just totally soaked in her own blood. And her son Timothy was an adult by this point. He was 22 years old and he was in the house as well. He explained there'd been this terrifying burglar who'd broken in and attacked his mum. He was like it was this tall Latino man with curly hair and he just legged it out of there. He said he didn't really know what he looked like because he was wearing a ninja mask and he'd stolen loads of money from the house. And he said that before he'd left, he'd actually knocked Timothy himself out. But this story didn't really fit with what detectives found at the scene. They found the murder weapon still in the home, which was actually a barbell that belonged to Timothy himself. There was also no evidence that anybody else had even been in that home, let alone broken in. Finally, after being confronted with this evidence, Timothy did admit that he lied. He confessed, actually, I killed my mum. He said it was because she had attacked him first in a mental health episode. He said, I was acting in self-defense. He said she'd randomly come up and attacked him, not recognizing him. She was screaming, she lunged at him, and he just had to defend himself with anything that he could reach. He said, I just killed her to protect myself. I loved my mum very much. And at his trial, he was only found guilty of involuntary manslaughter and given 3 years probation.
This is the disturbing final footage of Lars Mattank. Where is he and what happened to him? I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the case of the world's most famous missing tourist. Lars Mattank was a 28-year-old man from Germany, and he was as normal as any other man. He had a good bond with his family, he had a great group of friends, he was in a loving relationship, and he was a hard worker, working at a nearby power plant. On the 30th of June 2014, Lars and a group of his friends all jumped on a plane and jetted off on their first lads' holiday, going to Bulgaria for the week. They stayed in the Golden Sands region of Bulgaria inside of a resort, and all around they had an amazing holiday. They spent time relaxing on the beach, going in and out of the many clubs and bars, getting drunk and having a laugh, and they also made sure to spend some time watching some football. The day before they were scheduled to fly home, the 6th of July, Lars and his friends are all sat inside of a bar watching the football when Lars got into an altercation with another group of men. This is because he supported one team and they supported the other. After this altercation, Lars and his friends left the bar and headed towards a McDonald's, but because he didn't want anything, he decided to wait outside of the restaurant while his friends went inside. I did see it reported that Lars didn't eat very well on this holiday, and when his friends exited the McDonald's, Lars was nowhere to be seen. He would show back up at their hotel room hours later and told his friends the most wild story. He said after they went into McDonald's, a group of Russian men approached him and began attacking him, beating him up. He believed that these Russian men were hired by the men he had been arguing with in that bar. Although this didn't really make any sense, because wouldn't Lars have just got up and went into the McDonald's where his friends were for help if he was being approached by a group of angry men who looked like they were going to do him harm? Maybe the Russian men lured him away to beat him up. And if that was right, where had he been for the last couple of hours? The friends were worried and they told Lars that it would be a good idea to go and see a doctor just to get checked out before they headed home, and so he did. Lars had sustained an injury to his ear/eardrum, and so the doctor that was seeing him prescribed him some medication. He gave him a very commonly used antibiotic. The doctor also advised Lars to not get on the plane and go home that evening because of the change in air pressure when you're flying. This would further damage Lars's already injured ear. Despite his friends offering to wait and stay behind with Lars, he would wave them off, reassuring them that he would be fine. He was only going to stop for another 2 days or so and he would be back home in no time. And so his friends got on the plane back to Germany and left Lars behind. After checking out of the resort that they were in, Lars checked into a budget hotel which was nearby the airport. And it would be from here that his behaviour began to change and became worrying. Throughout the night, he would ring his mum Sandra several times, and on each and every phone call, he was erratic. On one phone call, he expressed to his mum that he was worried that he was being followed by a group of men and that they were going to attack him or even kill him. On another phone call, he demanded that Sandra shut down each and every one of his bank accounts, and in every single phone call, Sandra could hear the fear and distress in her son's voice. CCTV footage that was later recovered from the hotel would show that Lars would pace up and down the corridors for hours on end. Looking visibly scared, he would hide behind corners, he would hide in the lift, and he even left the hotel at one point. He left at around about 1 AM for about an hour before returning, and we have no idea where he went. night. Finally, on the 8th of July, Lars was set to return back home to Germany, Sandra feeling relief when she got a text from her son telling her that he had made it to the airport safely. Once inside, he would have to go and have a quick checkup with the doctor just to make sure that he was fit to fly, which the doctor deemed he was. His ear injury looked okay, but Lars's demeanour was still very strange. He seemed paranoid, his eyes were all over the room and he was fidgeting. While he was sat in the doctor's office, a construction worker who was doing some work inside of the airport quickly popped his head in, and this triggered Lars, who shot up out of his seat and screamed, quote, "I don't want to die here, I have to get out of here," before racing out of the office, running through the airport and out of the doors, leaving behind all of his luggage, which included his phone, his passport and all of his money. He would be captured on the cameras hopping over a fence and running into some nearby woodland, and that would be the final 100% certainty sighting of Lars Matthang. But what happened to him? Why was his behaviour so off? Was it because of his head injury or because of the medication? Where is he, and is there a chance that he could still be alive out there? Comment down below and let me know what you think.
One of the most creepiest unsolved mysteries, and to this day, no one knows the answer to one question. 4 teenage boys were in Birmingham when they were trespassing on private property in Hagley Wood. They were really hoping to find a bird's nest so they can bring home some eggs for their families. And then one of the boys, Bob, decided to climb a large tree, and as he reached the top and looked down into the hollow trunk, he spotted something white. At first, he probably thought he hit the jackpot of all eggs, a big white dome. But when he looked closer, it was actually a human skull. And creeped out, the boys panicked. They knew that they were trespassing, so who could they tell? So obviously they feared of getting in trouble, and instead of reporting it, they placed the skull back in the tree and promised to keep it a secret. But one of the boys had actually gotten a really uneasy feeling. He told his father, who immediately contacted the police. When officers arrived at the tree, they found more than just a skull. They uncovered the rest of a woman's skeletal remains, a pair of shoes, and a fake gold wedding ring. And even more disturbing was her hand was severed off, and it was found near her body. Maybe it was taken by some squirrels or something, but still, that's just creepy. Forensic pathologist Dr. James Webster examined the remains, and they estimated that the victim was a 35-year-old woman about 5 feet tall. They concluded that she had been likely dead for like 18 months. That's a pretty long time to be in a tree. He had also noticed something really weird about the skull. There was a piece of cloth jammed into the jaw. It raised a lot of suspicions on maybe she had been suffocated, but the boys did claim that they wedged a cloth-covered stick into the skull to pull it out of the tree. So nobody knows if the cloth was already there and part of the crime, or was it just a mistake from the boys. And the tree itself was a really odd detail as well. The hollowness of the tree in itself was so tight, it honestly seemed impossible for anybody to like climb inside on their own. And according to experts, if her body had been placed there after death, it must have happened really quickly, like before rigor mortis set in and stiffened her body. But despite her distinctive dental patterns, including 2 overlapping teeth, no dentist had recognized her. And with World War II in full swing, there were so many people still missing. So at that point, tracking her identity just seemed long gone and impossible. People honestly ran out of hope trying to identify her, until mysterious graffiti started popping up. The graffiti said, "Who put Bella in the witch elm?" This chilling message popped up on walls, buildings, and even a 200-year-old monument. Police started believing that the same person writing these messages knew something about the girl in the tree. But despite investigating all the leads that were tied to the graffiti, nothing ever came out. And then a bizarre letter, a woman named Anna claimed that Bella had been a Dutch immigrant who entered the UK illegally in 1941, and that she had been killed by a man who later died in 1942, driven by like insane guilt. Now stick with me. Another woman named Una Hainsworth claimed that her husband, Jack Mossop, had been caught up in a Germany spy ring. According to her, Jack and a man named Van Raal were at a pub with a Dutch woman who drank too much and passed out. Instead of helping her, like, you know, a sane person would, Van Raal allegedly insisted that they drive her to Hagley Wood, where they placed her inside the hollow tree, assuming she'd wake up and find her way home. But clearly, she never did. But according to Una, Jack was haunted by the incident and spiraled into a mental breakdown, dying in a psychiatric hospital in 1942, 1 year before Bella's remains were discovered. This theory had gained traction revelation when records showed 5 German spies had reportedly parachuted into England around that same time. One of them being a woman named Clara who vanished near Hagley Wood, and some even believed that Bella might have been Clara herself. But then here's where things get worse. When researchers had tried to go and get Bella's remains to gather her DNA, they literally discovered that her bones had vanished and that they were lost by the university that they had been stored at. So in 2018, experts attempted to reconstruct Bella's face using skull records for details. They were really hoping that somebody would eventually recognize Bella. But like everything else in this case, that went cold as well. So
this 14-year-old ended his classmate's life for wearing makeup to school. Lawrence Phobes King, also known as Larry, was born on January 13th of 1993 in Ventura, California. By 2008, Larry was 15 years old and a student at E.O. Green Junior High in Oxnard. Larry had a difficult upbringing and he spent a lot of time in the foster care system, but at school, Larry was known as outgoing, artistic, and confident. Larry loved to draw, sing, and experiment with fashion, like wearing makeup to school, jewelry, and even wearing high-heeled boots. But since Larry was so open about being who they were, it also made Larry an easy target. Some classmates admired Larry for their courage, while others bullied Larry. And one of those students would be 14-year-old Brandon McIerney. Just days before tragedy, Larry would now go by the name Letitia. Letitia, aka Larry, asked Brandon to be their Valentine, and this left Brandon angry and humiliated. On February 12th of 2008, in the school's computer lab, Brandon pulled out a handgun and shot Letitia, aka Larry, in the back of the head in front of all of their classmates. Letitia, aka Larry, was rushed to the hospital, but 2 days later was pronounced brain dead. Larry's family made the heartbreaking decision to remove them from the life support. The murder was quickly labeled as a hate crime, and Brandon was tried as an adult. Brandon pled guilty for a plea deal and was sentenced to 21 years in prison.
She is one of South Korea's most evil killers. She murdered her ex-husband in front of their son and then spent 23 hours dismembering his body. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Mr. Kang. Go Yoo-jeong was born and raised on the beautiful island of Jeju, South Korea. While attending college on the island, Go would meet Mr. Kang and the two immediately hit it off. They began to date, and friends of the couple would describe them as appearing very happy. They loved to go on holidays, travelling together. They spent a lot of their free time doing volunteering work. And all round, they were just like the picture perfect couple. After around 5 years of dating, the two would tie the knot, and this is when things began to change. After returning back home from their honeymoon, Go's personality shifted. She was no longer the happy-go-lucky woman that Mr. Kang had fallen in love with. She was now a woman who was always very irritable and would often snap at him. In fact, they actually missed their first flight home from their honeymoon because she wanted to stay in the airport in duty-free to go shopping. Kang tried to see past these changes. They were both now university students and money was tight, and he thought that maybe she was just taking longer to adjust to this new lifestyle than he was. However, their financial issues would only worsen when Go unexpectedly fell pregnant. After the birth of their son, there was no break in between the bad mood swings that Go would get into. If anything, they only got worse. She started becoming violent and aggressive towards Kang, hitting him, throwing things off him, and she even once threatened him with a sharp object. By 2016, Kang had had enough and he filed for divorce, which was granted a year later. Custody of their son was awarded to Go as she was working and Kang wasn't at this moment in time, and so he was deemed financially unstable. Despite this, however, he was granted visitation with his son as ordered by the court, but Go would make that visitation mission impossible. She would never pick up the phone anytime Kang rang, and when he came knocking at her door, she wouldn't answer. She would also decide to just not turn up to court regarding the visitation. This went on for 2 long years, Kang doing everything he can to try and get access to his son, when out of the blue, he received a text message from Go. She was asking him if he wanted to go away on a couple of nights away, all 3 of them. They were going to spend some quality time together like a proper happy family. Elated at the invitation and the offer to go and see his son, Kang couldn't have said yes quick enough. As he was excitedly packing a case ready for the next couple of days away, Go was inside of a shop buying items which were later described as being part of a murder kit. This included acid, rubber gloves, a saw, and other tools. On the 25th of May 2019, Go, Kang and their son all arrived at a guest house that Go had booked. And initially, they were all having a really great time. Kang was over the moon to be spending some time with his son, and Go seemed to be in a great mood. She was even cooking Kang one of his favourite meals, curry and rice, snapping a quick photo of him smiling before he was about to dig in and enjoy the food. Unbeknownst to Kang, Go had poisoned the food, crushing up a lethal amount of sleeping medication and mixing it in with the curry. The only reason she made the curry wasn't because it was Kang's favourite meal, but because the strong flavours inside of the food would mask the taste of the tablets. Not long after eating the meal, Kang began to feel strange. Drowsy, his body was heavy and numb. He picked himself up and went into the bedroom for a little lie down, where he would eventually fall into a deep sleep. Go was now under the impression that Kang was fully knocked out from the medication, and so she creeped into the bedroom, knife in hand. Despite their 5-year-old son watching what is about to happen, Go would raise the knife up in the air and forced it down into Kang's body, whose eyes shot open, actually shocking Go. He rolled off the bed, and in a terrified and panicked state, he tried dragging himself to the door while blood is oozing out of him, doing whatever he can to try and escape Go, but she quickly towered over him and proceeded to stab him in an uncontrollable frenzy until he was dead. The next morning, the little boy would be taken to his grandparents' house, while Go returned back to the guest house to begin the task of getting rid of Kang's body and clearing the crime scene. She would spend the next 23 hours not only extensively dismembering Kang, but physically cutting away the fat and the muscle away from his bones till Kang was no more than a skeleton. She would dispose of Kang's remains by stuffing them into some plastic bags. Some of the plastic bags were put just in the bin area of the guest house, while others were tossed into the ocean. Once back at the house, she meticulously scrubbed it from top to bottom, getting rid of each and every drop of blood that was visible to the naked eye, along with any DNA and any fingerprints. Or so she thought. As the days passed, Kang's family began growing concerned because they hadn't heard from him. His brother would be the one to contact the police with his worries, and he told the police that Kang had been to spend a couple of nights away with his ex-wife and his son in a guest house, and now they hadn't heard from him. When detectives arrived at the guest house, they ran a luminol test to see if there was any blood inside that wasn't visible to their naked eye, and the entire house lit up. Blood was discovered in the kitchen, in the bathroom, in the living room. It was discovered in the bedroom in a dragon motion, and it was also discovered on the roof, which just shows how much force each stab was delivered with. Go Yu-jeong would be arrested and charged with the murder of Mr. Kang. Her trial began in February 2020, where she would be found guilty of murder, dismemberment, and concealment of a corpse. Despite the prosecution fighting to give her the death penalty, she would be handed a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. We still have no idea why she decided to murder her ex-husband. It is believed because of his persistence in wanting to see his son, although we will never really know.
He was eaten alive at Disney World. On June 14th of 2016, Matt and Melissa Graves traveled from Elkhorn, Nebraska to Walt Disney World with their 2 children, 4-year-old Ella and 2-year-old Lane. The family arrived at Disney's Grand Floridian Resort, and they were so excited to be here and just spend time together as a family. That evening, around 9 p.m., they were all relaxing on the man-made beach right next to the Seven Seas Lagoon. Lane was just putting his feet in a few inches of shallow water when the most terrifying thing would happen. Out of nowhere, a nearly 7-foot alligator jumped out of the lagoon, clamped on Lane, and dragged him under. His father, Matt, immediately jumped in the water, putting his hand inside of the alligator's mouth, fighting desperately to help get his son free, but he was unsuccessful. Mind you, there are other families on the beach watching this as well, and they claimed that the attack happened so fast that no one was really able to process what was happening. The next thing they saw was the alligator and Lane disappear into the water, but by then it would be too late. Investigators launched an overnight search, and they trapped and euthanized several alligators, hoping they had the right one. Families were evacuated from the beach, and Disney closed down all surrounding resort lagoons. After 16 hours, Lane's body was found intact, only 10 to 15 feet away from where he was taken. An autopsy revealed that Lane's cause of death was traumatic injuries and drowning. It was later revealed that the lagoon only had signs that said no swimming and didn't say anything about alligators being inside of the water, and there was no type of fencing. Within days, Disney replaced those signs with specific alligator and wildlife warnings alongside with barriers and fencing. Matt and Melissa decided that they were not going to sue Disney, but they wanted to honor their son by founding the Lane Thomas Foundation. As for the Grand Floridian, Disney built a lighthouse statue in memory of Lane.
If you ever wonder why women choose the bear, it's because of stories like this. This is Amber Gibson. She was 16 years old when she was sexually assaulted and murdered by her own brother Connor. They both lived in foster homes since the ages of 3 and 5, but at the time of her murder, Amber was still living in a children's home while Connor was living at a hostel. Her horrible story begins in June of 2021 when she was sexually assaulted while asleep by 20-year-old Jamie Stars. Jamie was a complete stranger to her, but while Amber was at a party, she woke up naked from the waist down in a bed with Jamie under the covers. Just 5 months later, Amber made plans to hang out with her brother Connor on November 26, 2021, and she was really excited to see him and hang out with him since they no longer lived together. She was so excited that she even posted a selfie with him online. The two were caught on security footage going to Cadzo Glen Park in Hamilton, but roughly 90 minutes later, Connor was seen leaving the park alone. While he was there, he forcibly took off all of Amber's clothes and sexually assaulted her. During the assault, he hit her over the head several times, causing severe blunt force trauma. He then strangled her to death and hid her body in bushes and branches, returning home like nothing happened. Connor was then caught on security footage carrying a plastic bin to a dumpster behind his hostel and throwing away the items inside. Those items turned out to be his shorts and shirt, which were covered in Amber's blood. Obviously, when Amber didn't return home that night, she was reported missing, but her body wouldn't be found for another 2 days. In that time, Connor called the children's home where she was staying and pretended that she was still alive, and he even posted a tribute for her on Facebook. When her body was found, her clothes were also found nearby, and Connor's DNA was found on her shorts. Because of this, Connor was quickly arrested, although he initially denied any involvement. But this story gets worse. Before Amber's body was found, 45-year-old Stephen Corrigan, who was a complete stranger to her and Connor, found her body in the park. But instead of calling the police like a normal person, he instead sexually assaulted Amber's dead body and then tried hiding it further in the bushes. So in a matter of months, Amber was assaulted by 3 different men and eventually murdered at the hands of her own brother, someone she trusted. Last summer, Connor was sentenced to life in prison for the assault and murder of his sister, but he'll be eligible for parole after 22 years. Jamie Stars, the man who sexually assaulted Amber just 5 months before her murder, was sentenced to 10.5 years. He was also convicted of sexually assaulting another teenage girl just 1 month before Amber. Although he's technically considered a high risk of assaulting again, his sentence was so low because, according to authorities, he showed cognitive and emotional immaturity. He was reportedly taken from his home at the age of 3 and by 9 already had addiction issues. So because of his chaotic lifestyle and his young age at the time of the crime, authorities believe he has a better chance at rehabilitation, thus the short sentence. As for Stephen Corrigan, the man who found Amber deceased and decided to sexually assault her body instead of calling the police, he was sentenced to just 9 years in prison. Amber lived a very short and very tragic life. Everyone in her life let Amber down, and it's exactly stories like this that prove why women would rather choose the bear.
The case of the Menendez brothers is one of the most controversial true crime cases to this day. These 2 young men did kill their parents, but whether or not they're victims or cold-blooded killers has been highly debated for decades. The Menendez family appeared to be picture perfect. They were extremely well off financially and lived in this big, beautiful mansion in Beverly Hills. The father, Jose, was an extremely successful CEO. His wife, Kitty, was seen as a devoted wife and mother, and their 2 sons, Lyle and Eric, were handsome, charismatic, all-American boys and exceptional tennis players. But the perfect family that they showed to the rest of the world was an absolute lie. The father, Jose, was pretty much hated by everyone he knew, and he was having multiple affairs. The mother, Kitty, was deeply unhappy. She was a heavy drinker and also using substances. And the boys, Lyle and Eric, had an unspeakable amount of pressure put on them to be perfect and appear perfect. The older brother, Lyle, was actually going bald at 14 and wetting the bed at 14, so it just shows the amount of stress that he was clearly under. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. Lyle and Eric were definitely seen as rich, spoiled brats, and maybe they were. Their father, Jose, was actually considering of cutting them out of his will at the time that our case really takes place. The facade that the Menendez family put on to the outside world that they were this perfect family all came crashing down on August 20th, 1989, when Lyle was 21 years old and Eric was 18 years old. and both of them burst into their home one night and opened fire on their parents. It was a brutal scene. Kitty was shot 10 times and Jose was shot 6 times by their own children. And then about an hour and 45 minutes later, after the two boys felt like they put together an alibi, Lyle called 911.
What's the problem? Someone killed my parents. Pardon me? Someone killed my parents. What? Who was the person that was shot? My mom and my dad. Your mom and dad? Okay, hold on a second.
When the police showed up to the scene, both the brothers were hysterical and inconsolable, and the police definitely believed their story that they just came home and found their parents dead in their house. So the police actually didn't test either of the brothers' hands for GSR. It actually seemed like the boys were going to get away with it, and they were set financially. They were actually set to inherit about $20 million from their inheritance and also their father's life insurance policy, which is actually over $50 million in today's money. And the boys quickly started spending their parents' money like crazy. If it was nice and the boys wanted it, they were buying it. They were buying nice cars, nice shoes, nice Rolex watches. They bought 2 conjoining condos that were really, really nice, and they would throw these really wild parties. The brothers were only ever actually caught because one day Eric just broke down, whether it was from the stress or the guilt or a little bit of both, but he confessed to his therapist, Dr. Oziel. Not gonna lie, Dr. Oziel is kind of seen as a sketchy therapist, like not that great of a dude, and instead of turning in Eric and Lyle, he actually secretly recorded them. And it's actually believed that he was going to use those secret recordings of their confession to blackmail them for some of all that money that they inherited. But Dr. Oziel actually had a mistress that knew about all of this. Definitely some weird pillow talk, but she turned in Eric and Lyle for the murder of their parents. The boys were both arrested and set to go to trial, and that's when it first came out that Lyle and Eric killed their parents not for financial gain, but in self-defense after a lifetime of abuse at the hands of both their father and their mother. They do claim that both of their parents abused them, but that most of the really traumatic abuse came from their father, Jose, but that their mother, Kitty, knew about it and just didn't do anything, while their father psychologically abused them, physically abused them, and SA'd them for years. During their trial, both of the brothers took the stand and testified in gruesome, horrifying detail of the SA that they endured at the hands of their own father. And a lot of it is available online and on YouTube if you guys want to watch it. I will just say it is really, really hard and heartbreaking to see because they do go, like I said, in really horrifying detail. Trial was even broadcasted live in its entirety. It was a media frenzy, a public circus. Literally everyone was talking about it. Everyone had an opinion. And honestly, the public had really little sympathy for the two boys. They were definitely not widely believed either. At this point in the early 90s, boys and men being SA'd wasn't really something that we talked about. And they were mocked. Really, they were mocked. They were even mocked in a really famous skit that they did on SNL. But most of the people that actually knew the Menendez family and Eric and Lyle supported Eric and Lyle. Actually, 51 people testified about how cruel their father, Jose, was, and that many of them knew that they were being physically abused, and some of them even testified that they knew that the boys were being SA'd for years. Ultimately, the jury was actually split, deadlocked. They were actually split by gender, which does not surprise me at all. All of the women jurors wanted to acquit the boys, while all of the men jurors wanted them to be found guilty. So they had to have a second trial, and this time the judge said that he didn't really want the boys to talk about their SA as much. So this time the boys were found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This is extremely controversial and highly debated to this day, and a lot of people don't really think that they got a fair trial. There are a lot of people that to this day believe that the boys were lying about the abuse and it was just a defense strategy and that the boys really killed their parents because they wanted all of their money. while there's other people that truly believe that the boys were being abused, that they were deeply traumatized after decades of terrible abuse and were truly terrified of their parents. There's also a few people that kind of go in the middle, that they believe that the boys were being abused, but that the primary motive was that they wanted the parents' money. Please, please, please tell me what you guys all think. I'm definitely interested to read all of your guys' point of views, your thoughts, and your opinions in the comments. Personally, when I first heard about this case years ago and I researched it, I was really on the fence with what I believed. It actually wasn't until I went on YouTube and went online and actually listened to Eric and Lyle testify in such detail about the abuse and about them being SA'd that I really don't think they're lying at all. If you're on the fence or you do think they're lying, I would definitely watch those clips before you truly 100% make up your mind. The brothers were actually denied to be in the same prison for 22 years, and it was really hard on both of them because they were so close. But they were reunited in the same prison in 2018. Very recently, some new updates and some new evidence has come out that might actually prove that Lyle and Eric have been telling the truth the entire time. Very recently, one of Eric and Lyle's cousins was going through like her storage and actually found a letter that Eric sent her family 8 months before his parents died that documented the abuse and also how terrified he was of his father. Also, another man has recently come out that said that Jose was also essaying him when he was 14 and 15 years old. There are many people that are hopeful that these new updates and new evidence could actually change Lyle and Eric's conviction from first degree to manslaughter, so they could be released actually on time served. This was all really coming out in the public back in March, so only a couple months ago, but I haven't really seen anything else since, but I'll be sure to keep you guys updated. Until then, definitely let me know all your thoughts about the Menendez brothers and just keep discussing with me in the comments. I'll be in there replying to as many of you guys as I can. And I love you guys. Let me know what case you'd want to see me cover next, and I'll see you tomorrow.
She was 11 walking to school when someone tased her, threw her in the car, and abducted her for 18 years. Her name's JC. She was a 5th grader wearing her favorite all-pink outfit, backpack on, smiling, walking to school to catch the bus. When suddenly she hears a car behind her, it slows down and stops right beside her. A strange man rolls the window down. She thinks he's lost, maybe he's about to ask for directions, but instead he pulls a stun gun. He tases her and her body hits the ground. But before she can even scream, a woman jumps out of the car, grabs JC by her arms, and throws her into the back seat. They stripped off all her clothes, blindfolded her, and just sped off. And her stepdad happened to be at the window. He immediately noticed. He runs outside, jumps on his bike, screaming, chasing down this car, but he wasn't fast enough. And just like that, JC was gone. And her kidnappers, a convicted named Philip Garrido and his wife Nancy. They took JC 2 hours away and locked her in a tiny soundproof shed behind their house, threatening that if she tried to escape, their Dobermans would attack her. They handcuffed her and left her there naked and alone. Her very first night, she was forced to shower with this filthy man who would come to rape her hundreds of times. He beat, tortured, even starved JC for 18 years. But his sick obsession of sex with young girls did not start with JC. He's kidnapped and multiple girls, and at one point he was even sentenced to 50 years, but he got out at 11 for good behavior. And that's actually how he met Nancy, in prison, so they're pretty much a perfect match. 3 years later, Philip gets JC pregnant and she gives birth to a baby girl, and at 17 she had another girl, both in that filthy shed with no doctors at all. Her babies were taught to believe that Nancy was their mom and JC was just their sister. And the craziest part, Philip was on parole. Police visited that house multiple times, but not once did they maybe, I don't know, check the whole property, including the backyard. It wasn't until 2009, 18 years later, that Philip made a big mistake, but I don't even want to call it a mistake because that's literally the reason why they're alive. Philip took both of JC's daughters, who are 12 and 15 by this point, to a parole meeting at UC Berkeley. But one of the staff, Lisa Campbell, bless her heart, notices really weird behavior from the girls and Philip. They're acting really submissive and they looked really pale, as if they've never been in the sun, while Philip is just reeking of suspicious behavior. Lisa does a background search on Philip and sees that he is a offender on parole for kidnapping and rape minors. He immediately contacts his parole officer, who's like, wait a minute, he's not supposed to be around minors at all. So he gets arrested, but he claims that the 2 girls are the daughters of a relative, so the officers are like, okay, bring the relative in. And so the next day, Philip and Nancy head back to the parole office with the two girls and JC, but he introduces her identity as Alyssa, a fake name. The officers are pressing JC, trying to confirm her identity, but she's so afraid of Philip and like her daughters being taken away that she goes with the lie. But after hours of press, JC actually broke and told the truth. She told them everything: the kidnapping, the years of torture, the rape, how those two little girls are hers from being held captive. The officer was shocked, and just like that, after 18 years, JC Dugard is finally a freed woman. Philip and Nancy were arrested, and in court, they had the nerve to plead not guilty. I mean, who's gonna believe that though? Philip was sentenced to 431 years, and Nancy only got 39 years, and she will be eligible for parole in 2029. That's 4 years from now. But JC was reunited with her family. Her daughters are now young women, and they are finally getting a chance to live. I just love a survival story. It's always a better ending, but as always, please be safe out there because
this family moved out of their haunted house and then mysteriously disappeared. This case is absolutely filled with unexpected twists and turns. So if you're not already like completely familiar with the Jameson family mystery, then buckle up. The Jameson family consisted of Bobby Dale Jameson, his wife Sherilyn Leanne Jameson, and their 6-year-old daughter Madison Stormy Star Jameson. And at the time that our case like really starts, the family was experiencing turmoil from like every single angle. Well, for one, neither Bobby or Sherilyn were working at the time. They were both living off of disability checks, which is not a lot of money. So they were experiencing like a lot of financial issues at the time. Sherilyn's mental health was also unfortunately declining at this time. And also Bobby was experiencing like some really serious issues with his own father. Actually, only 6 months before our case takes place, Bobby tried to put out a protection order, like a restraining order against his own father because his father made like multiple threats against him and his family, but unfortunately a judge declined that restraining order. But Bobby did say around this time that him and his entire family were scared for their lives and his father was a dangerous man. And on top of all of this, the Jameson family believed that their house was haunted by at least 4 spirits. They said that they were being like completely tormented by these spirits, and also the spirits were communicating with their 6-year-old daughter Madison. They had recently spoken to a priest to like get help with these spirits and even asked if there were special bullets that could harm spirits. But it wasn't only the Jameson family that thought their house was haunted. There were multiple friends and family members that went into their house and confirmed that there was something like evil and dark in that home. So for all of these reasons, you know, the money problems, Bobby's father, the haunted house, when our case takes place, the Jameson family decided to leave their home and buy a plot of land in the middle of nowhere up in the mountains and live out of a shipping container. In October of 2009, the entire Jameson family left their house with their dog Maisie to, you know, go tour a plot of land that they were considering buying and were never seen alive again. The Jameson family had security cameras on their property, so there is security footage of Bobby and Sherilyn leaving their home. They start packing up their truck with a bunch of their belongings, and it's said that Bobby and Sherilyn appear to be in a zombie-like trance and multiple times will just stop packing up their truck and just stare into like nothing. Sherilyn can also be seen packing a briefcase into the truck, and to this day, that briefcase has never been found. 8 days after the Jameson family was reported missing, their truck was found abandoned in this remote area of the woods, but the entire family was missing. There was no evidence of a struggle in or outside of the vehicle, and all of their belongings but that briefcase were found in the vehicle, including like their valuable items, a GPS, both of their cell phones, Bobby's wallet, and Sherilyn's purse. But probably the 2 most strange things that were found in the vehicle were $32,000 cash stuffed under the driver's seat, and the family's beloved dog Maisie was still in the car. Maisie was severely dehydrated and malnourished, but miraculously still alive. To me, this proves that the family either did not leave the car on their own free will, or if they did, they thought that they were going to be right back. I always find myself going back to the $32,000 in cash that was stuffed under the driver's seat. For one, who has that much cash? Why would someone have that much cash? And for a family that was apparently experiencing like severe money problems, where did the money come from? To this day, where the money came from has never been explained, and even their own family members have no idea where the money came from. A huge air and ground search was done to find the Jameson family. It was actually one of the largest in the state's history, but unfortunately, nothing would be found for over 4 years, when in 2013, the partial remains of Bobby, Sherilyn, and Madison were all found deep in the woods, less than 3 miles away from where their truck was found. All of the family members appeared to be face down in the dirt and were lined up side by side. Unfortunately, a cause of death could never be determined, and to this day, this case remains unsolved. There is so much to unpack here, so we're gonna jump straight into some of the main theories about what happened to the Jameson family. The first theory being that the Jameson family parked their car and left to go on maybe like a little hike and got lost and unfortunately succumbed to the elements. This theory doesn't make sense to me for a few reasons. The first one being that they didn't bring their GPS or their cell phones to go on a hike. This was an area they weren't familiar with, and I just feel like that would be something they would do. Also, the fact that they left their dog Maisie in the car. Dogs like to go on hikes. Also, like you remember, Bobby was on disability because he was experiencing chronic back pain. I don't think he would go on this long hike in the first place. Also, the way that the bodies were found, all of them face down, lined up, points to me personally that there is definitely some kind of foul play involved. Which brings us into our next theory that either one or both parents unaligned their family and then themselves. You know, sometimes mental health problems and financial problems can have tragic consequences. Also, there was a flower that had been picked and left with Madison's body, which could be a sign of maybe a parent's remorse or guilt. Also, in the Jameson family truck that was found abandoned, there was an 11-page letter that Sherilyn had wrote Bobby that had mentions of divorce and also death. But there was no weapon that was found at the scene where the bodies were found. So personally, that points away from this theory for me. Also, their loved ones feel very strongly against this theory. The next theory is that Bobby's father had something to do with this, that he was involved. You know, there was that protection order that was made against him by Bobby 6 months before this happened. Also, he had threatened Bobby and his family, but allegedly Bobby's father had an airtight alibi. He was also an older man, so they don't think that he could have physically done this, even if he wanted to. The next theory about what happened to the Jameson family is that it involved substance use or a substance deal gone wrong. If the Jameson family was using or buying or selling substances, that could explain all of that money, the $32,000 that was found stashed in their car that no one knows where they got it. Substance use could also explain the strange behavior that the Jameson family was experiencing. You know, the paranoia, thinking their house was haunted, and that zombie-like trance that they were seen in when they were packing their car. And we haven't even fully discussed the fact that the Jameson family was trying to leave their life to raise their daughter out of a storage container, like one of these. That's pretty odd. There's also that missing suitcase that they were packing in their car that to this day has never been found. It's definitely possible that that suitcase was either filled with more money or maybe even substances. The investigators on this case have said that there's absolutely zero evidence that points to this theory. Also, their loved ones are adamant that they did not use substances, and even if they did, they said that they would have never put 6-year-old Madison in a dangerous situation like that. That brings us to our last theory, that the Jameson family was kidnapped and killed by someone else that we haven't discussed, whether that's someone that they did know or just a stranger. This also takes us to the biggest piece of evidence for me personally that this involved foul play. Bobby's cell phone that was found locked in their truck when their truck was found was used multiple times 3 and 4 days after the family disappeared. There was also this really infamous photo of Madison that was taken the day the family disappeared on Bobby's cell phone. People believe that Madison looks extremely uncomfortable in this photo. They were also able to track where this photo was taken, and it was taken like deep in the woods away from where their bodies was found. Is it possible that this photo was taken by whoever did something to the Jameson family? You're definitely gonna have to let me know what you think about that. For me, a majority of the evidence definitely points that there's foul play of some kind. It's just so hard to lock into a theory because there's so many leads that point in like every direction. Please let me know if you liked today's video format where we talked about an unsolved case and then dissect and brainstorm all of the possible theories. Definitely also let me know which theory you believe the most, and you know, all your opinions, thoughts, theories in the comments, and definitely which case you'd want to see me cover next. I love you guys so much, and I will see you tomorrow.
They had chance to save her before she was murdered, but they went to the wrong house. Just a warning, this is one of the most horrific UK cases in recent years. It was August 2023 in Woking in Surrey. Adorable little Sarah Sharif was 10 years old. Now, she was an absolute joy to everybody that knew her. Her teachers couldn't speak highly enough of her. She was kind, gentle, loving, and really pure-hearted. Could honestly cry just looking at the pictures of her. She looked like such an absolute dream. Now, her dad was the polar opposite of all of that. He was called Irfan Sharif. He was a taxi driver from Pakistan. Her mum was Olga, a Polish woman, and the pair had Sarah in 2013. They'd already got a son too. Irfan was extremely violent. He'd beaten Olga and had been arrested at one point for tying a belt around her neck. He locked her in a room, he confiscated her phone, he'd apparently also tried to set her on fire by chucking petrol over her and setting her alight. He was clearly a very, very violent, dangerous man, but the pair split up and Irfan met a new woman called Binash Batul. She was a stay-at-home mum. I believe she had kids as well from a previous relationship, so in the end the household was Binash and Irfan, Sarah, a bunch of the other kids, and the uncle, Faisal Malik. And it goes without saying this was an incredibly busy household, and there was always chaos coming from inside that house. Neighbours were like, it was always just mayhem, screaming, shouting, banging. And what makes this case most sick to me is that people were aware of what was going on. Binash didn't actually hide it. In fact, she would send things to her friends like, oh my god, he's beating her up so badly, he's going to break her arm or her leg. And what baffled me was the response from so-called friend who said something along the lines of, what does she do? What do you mean, what does she do? I just find it infuriating. Why was Binash not ringing the police? Don't text your mates about this. Call the authorities. School were some of the only people that actually did try and protect this little girl. They reported to social services that she was coming in covered in bruises. And in a really callous sort of tactical move, the parents actually started putting her in a hijab to hide her marks and bruises. But social services deemed just keep an eye on it, just take no further action. Then, essentially, so that nobody else interfered, Irfan just sent a random email to the school saying, don't worry about looking after Sarah anymore, I'm going to homeschool her. And many would never see her alive again. Now, horrifically, at one point, social services even turned up to do a home visit for Sarah, but they had the wrong address on the system, so they just showed up at the wrong house. Who knows if they would have been able to save her if they'd gone to the right address. Behind the walls of her home, she was bitten, she was beaten with a cricket bat, a metal pole, the leg of a high chair. It was absolutely horrific. There are no words for it. And on the 8th of August that year, I don't think we'll ever truly know what happened behind the walls of that home, but Binash texted Irfan to say, come home, something's wrong with Sarah. So he headed back to the house, and instead of checking out the little girl, seeing that she was hurt in some way and taking her somewhere to help her, he decided that she was messing around, so he grabbed a metal pole and started hitting her with it to the point that she died. And the parents just decided that now is the perfect opportunity to just leave the house, run away. They booked a flight to Pakistan, and by this point, when they were on the phone booking this flight, they're in the home with their other children. That's also what's so horrific to me, is the fact that Sarah is lying upstairs dead on the bed, and these other kids, bless them, they're just having to be in that house. The next day, the entire family boarded a plane, and the day after that, Irfan actually rang police in the UK to admit, I killed my daughter. The call was absolutely disgusting. He said, I beat her up too much. When police showed up to the home, it was eerily quiet. So chilling to watch that body cam footage. Police are sort of creeping through the home, which is absolutely immaculate, and then there's just this little dead girl upstairs. There was a note next to her, essentially off her dad, explaining that he was scared and he'd run away like a coward. In the September, police raided Irfan's dad's house in Pakistan and found all of the rest of the family's kids. Stepmom, uncle, and Irfan were all arrested. At the trial, details came out of Sarah's injuries, and they're just honestly too horrific to even comprehend. Over 70 injuries, 11 fractures, traumatic brain injury, strangulation, burns from scalding water. I can't even continue. I'd be here all day if I started reeling them all off. Both Irfan and Binash were found guilty of murder and got life. The uncle was found guilty for causing or allowing the death of a child and got just 16 years.
Police arrive. They find him hovering over this man, practically wearing nothing, making animalistic noises, growling like an animal, and biting his face off. The police could hear human flesh being chewed off. I did cover this case over a year ago, I think now, so if you think that you have heard this story from me before, you have. I'm covering it now with slightly more details, a little bit longer. But I feel like now that you guys know me a little bit better, you know how important mental health is for me. And this case has left me with so many questions, and I just want to start the conversation again. You guys have no idea what I just went through. I was filming by the window, which I haven't done in such a long time, and someone decided to start mowing their lawn. We had to move locations. The sun is setting. It's a disaster. We're gonna keep going. Austin Haroof was born and raised in Florida. His father was the most strict one out of the two parents. He was a dentist. The mom, way more laid back. She wasn't really the type to give rules to the kids, but the balance that the parents had between them kind of seemed to work out well. He had a younger sister named Haley, who was his best friend. The two of them spent so much time together, and they had such a cute brother-sister relationship. Now, when Austin was a teenager, his parents did get divorced. The two kids decided to stay and live with the mom, but they still kept a relationship with the dad and saw him quite often. As a kid in middle school, Austin was pretty normal. He got good grades, did well in school, but he did struggle with bullying. He started getting bullied a lot because he gained a little bit of weight and got some acne. Again, we know how mean kids can be, which is ruthless. But when it came to high school, on the other hand, he did a completely 180. He became an athlete, a football player. He became obsessed with his fitness and just improving his physical appearance overall. It was all that he focused on, just being the best version of himself in high school. After he graduated in 2015, he went to Florida State University. At first, he was studying biology, but then switched his major to be exercise science. He also joined a fraternity, and he was your typical college boy. He was out often with his friends. Just being a dude, enjoying college, they had a lot of late nights. It was a common occurrence for Austin to have one too many, and I think it gave him the liquid courage that he kind of lacked. It gave him the confidence to really act the way that he wanted to act. It just honestly came with the environment that he was in. He was new to college. He was in a frat. He was partying. He also met a girl that year, and she became his girlfriend. So freshman year, overall a good time, but it was the summer after his freshman year, the summer of 2016, when things changed completely. He completely changed the way that he was living his life again, did a 180 again. He left school for the summer and he decided that he was going to be really zoned in on his health and fitness journey again. He was taking care of himself, working out, eating healthy, staying away from anything that could potentially be harmful to his body. He was in the mindset of, my body is a temple, and anything that will not nourish it, I will not touch. Clean, healthy, that's all that he wanted to be. But during this time as well, so many things go on, and it's gonna sound messy, but that is because it is. That is how it went. And this is all within the same summer, mind you. Austin started to get really into religion. I'm not exactly sure what religion he was into, but when you look up what his beliefs are, there's a lot of talk of Illuminati. So do with that what you will, but he also started putting a lot of thought into becoming a civil rights leader. He all of a sudden was really passionate about securing equal rights and opportunities for people. It was something that he talked about proudly and quite openly and frequently. He also got a new hobby that kind of started out as a hobby, but then he was kind of like, oh my God, can I make this a career? He got into music, specifically rapping, and he started to refer himself as Austy Frosty. He was really passionate about the music that he was creating, the rapping music. During that summer as well, he did have a job. He got a job working as a dental assistant for his father, and his attitude and character while at his place of work was questionable because he started getting a little bit too close to the patients. Like, you know, when you meet someone new, they start asking you about your life, but then they start asking you really personal questions, and then they start getting like emotional based on your answers and just getting really involved in your life for someone that you just met and it's your first conversation that you're having with them. That's who Austin was. He would ask the patients about their problems. He would get really emotional, and he would ask them questions that were so in depth that the patients were starting to feel uncomfortable. He was just way too attached, way too involved. In the summer of 2016, he took a trip to go visit his girlfriend in Tampa, and it was when he came back from the trip that everything changed rapidly and to a terrifying degree. And a lot of people talk about what happened when he went to go visit his girlfriend, because he came back a whole different person. When he came back from that trip, he was this born again person. All of his viewpoints on anything in life were different. He said he was evolving into a different person who was going to be helping people. He said he would be remembered as this great figure that did incredible things to change the world. He said he was never going to be sad again. He said he found his purpose, and his purpose was to be great and to live a great life and give hope to people. Sounds cool, right? Generally, like, helping people is good, but the way that he would talk about it, it's really sad. That's why I want to post this video, because I want to have this conversation, because we'll just get into it. Needless to say, the people around him noticed the change, because it was a drastic change, and he would say things that were odd as well. He would say things such as, "I'm sorry you think I'm so strange now. I don't think I'm going crazy." Like, these are messages that he texted his girlfriend. "I don't think I'm going crazy. I'm just evolving. I'm becoming more intelligent. Think I'm worthy, and just to help others with the pain they have. That's all I want. I've been so weird these past few days. I don't think I'm going crazy. I am no longer afraid of anything." And the evolution of his character kind of went all over the place, which I'm sure you're able to tell. But at one point, it led to him believing that he was Jesus, and he started dressing the way that Jesus dressed. He started to believe that he could bless water to make it holy. He often spoke about the devil. He said he would see demons everywhere, and he was really scared that the devil was coming after him to kill him. He would say that he would see them all around him, and anything that wasn't light, so like the actual lack of light, the dark, but also dark colors, dark clothing, anything dark in general, he related to being evil, to the point that he would sleep with the lights turned on because he would not dare be in the dark. He was convinced the devil and demons lived in the dark, and he had to protect his family, because if he didn't, the demons would get him. He was so concerned about his little sister that he started spending the night in her room, sleeping on her floor to protect her from the dark, to make sure that she stayed alive. This is really genuinely what he was thinking in his head. Throughout the same time, Austin started believing that he was part human, part animal. He was convinced at times that he was part human, part dog. Other times he thought that he was part human, part horse. And it wasn't just like random little comments that he would make. Like, when he had a new belief, he fully believed it, and he would talk about it to everyone. Like, he would tell people when he thought that he was half human, half dog, he would tell people that he would hear dogs barking, and he believed that the dogs barking were souls in the dogs trying to talk to him. Austin also became convinced that he was invincible, that nothing could harm him. He started walking and running through the streets onto incoming traffic because he believed that he genuinely would not get hurt, couldn't get hurt, and that would be the case when he was driving as well. He was driving like a maniac because he thought that nothing could harm him. He was absolutely convinced that nothing could hurt him, but it sounds like it was one or two ways. Either he was absolutely petrified of everything and paranoid, or he was feeling like a superhero and thought that nothing could hurt him. The way that his character was switching so fast and so drastically is obviously a sign of mental health, but it's just the question being, what was it? Which we're going to be talking about what he was diagnosed with and what was found in his system, etc. But let's keep going. His Google searches were also super alarming as well. He searched things such as, what does it mean when people sell their soul to the devil? How to sell your soul to the devil? What am I crazy really means, ways to overcome fear and anxiety, selling your soul to the devil, how to know if you are crazy, I am going crazy, I think I'm going crazy, am I, tree of knowledge of good and evil, Wikipedia, schizophrenia, depression, anxiety, panic, and bipolar disorder, auditory hallucinations when falling asleep. So obviously something very confusing and very disturbing was going on in his brain. On top of that, Austin was not sleeping. He said that he physically could not fall asleep because he didn't know how to turn his brain off, and his brain was always going, so he was just awake. And everyone, and I know half the comments are going to be like, he was taking substances, there was obviously something in his system, but we're going to get to that part. August 13th of 2016 was a Saturday. That night, Austin had dinner with his dad and his dad's girlfriend. The dad said that at dinner, Austin was acting very frazzled. He was on edge, kind of all over the place, very visibly anxious. And again, switching back and forth from acting really scared and then acting like he was a superhero. He ended up bickering with his father. He left the restaurant that night. He ends up walking home to his mother's house. And remember how he was scared of the dark? Well, on his walk home, a stoplight went out and Austin absolutely freaked out. He started running around like crazy. He ran into the first shop that he saw, freaking out. People were terrified because they thought something was really wrong, but Austin was just scared of the dark. August 14th, the next day, Austin goes to a weapon show with his father, and at the show he again seems petrified. He's not sure what to do, but he's definitely scared of something, and he's asking all the people at the show about self-defense, about what weapons he can buy to protect himself, and he ends up buying a sharp weapon. Why did his father take him to a weapon show when he was in that state of mind? We don't know. The next day, August 15th, Austin decides that he wants to go on a run on the beach. Fair, completely normal, but he shows up to the beach, he starts running, and then he gets, I guess he was thinking that he was a dog again, and he gets on all fours and starts literally running like a dog on the sand. And by the way, as I'm telling this story, what he did was absolutely terrible. There are no excuses for the way that he behaved, and he should be behind bars because he is obviously harmful. But at the same time, there is that half of me that feels so bad for the kid. There was obviously something not right in his head, and I mean, it was clear solely by his Google searches, but also by the things that he was talking about and texting people, that he was not right in the head. That afternoon, he ends up going to his dad's house. He goes to pick up his car, and his father sees that he's so out of it and acting completely reckless again, and he's like, I'm not gonna give you the keys. Austin gets on top of the car, on the hood of the car, starts jumping up and down loudly, creating a scene until the dad eventually gives him the keys and he goes home. That night, Austin stops by a party that some of his friends were having, and remember that he doesn't want to have any beverages that you can't have until you're 21-year-old. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? He doesn't want to have any of those beverages because his body is a temple. He doesn't want to put anything harmful in his body, but when he's at the party, he takes one of these beverages that you can only have when you're 21. He starts pouring it all over his hand, and he tells his friend that he's doing this because he has to feed his hand. That night, he goes to dinner at a restaurant with his dad and the dad's girlfriend again, and he ends up walking away because he feels trapped in there. He says almost claustrophobic. I think he just ends up walking out of the restaurant, and somehow he ends up back at his mom's house. If you ask him now, he has no idea how he ended up there, but somehow he's back at his mom's house. His mom sees him, immediately concerned, and to make matters worse, at her house he picks up a bottle of oil and just starts chugging it, and the mom is like, what is going on here? I don't know why. For whatever reason, the mom decides to take him back to the restaurant with his father. I guess the mom probably felt confused on what to do, so she was like, let's go get your dad and see what he says. But he ends up back at the restaurant again, gets in a little bicker argument with his dad, so he leaves and he ends up back outside, and he is running around like crazy on the streets in the phase of where he's feeling invincible, like nothing can hurt him. He is absolutely out of control. Then he sees something in the dark. Austin is terrified with the dark, and he says that he sees a demon-like figure, so he starts booking it even faster because he's freaking out. He's terrified of whatever this figure is that he thinks is a demon or the devil. He's running until he sees a light, and he runs to the light. It's a garage in a neighborhood that was open. There was a couple sitting inside of the garage just on chairs hanging out. It was a married couple, John and Michelle Stevens. John was 59 years old. He owned a landscaping company. Michelle was 53 years old and she worked in finance, but at this point of the story, they were both retired. John and Michelle have been described by family members as very friendly, very sweet, very kind people, just genuinely good people, the kind of people that you want to surround yourself with because they're just good at their core. Austin sees their light on. He's running towards them as fast as he can until he gets inside of the garage. He is screaming in a panic, and as a reaction, Michelle starts screaming as well because she doesn't know this man just came into her garage screaming. She's freaking out. And because she starts yelling, Austin now thinks that she is the evil one. He starts getting convinced that Michelle is evil, that she's a witch, and that she's there to hurt him. And we know how out of control Austin gets when he feels threatened and or scared. Well, he had the weapon that he had purchased at that show in his pocket, and he pulled it out and started overpowering Michelle with the sharp weapon through her skin over and over again. And then he turns to John and starts doing the same thing to him. He then looks around the garage. He finds a weapon. I can't say the name, but a sharp weapon that is about this big, and turns around to Michelle and John and starts going at it with that weapon. He also at some point picked up a bottle of bleach and started drinking it. Next to Michelle and John lived a man called called Jeff Fisher. He hears the commotion. He runs outside because they're screaming and yelling. He wants to know what's going on. He walks over to the garage and sees the crime scene that was horrible. Austin sees him, turns to him with the sharp weapon, and starts using the weapon on his head and on his back. Somehow he is able to escape. He's able to get back to his house, and he calls 911. He says, please get medical. There's a young man attacking a woman across the street, and the panic in his voice, the 911 call is so sad. Around the same time as well, Austin's mom is calling 911, not because she has any idea of what's going on, but because she doesn't know where her son is, and she's scared that he might be capable of hurting himself or others around him. So her 911 call is really calm. She just calls and say, hey, I'm worried about my son. I can't find him. I'm concerned for his safety. I'm not sure what to do. Police show up to John and Michelle's house. They find Austin hovering over John, practically wearing nothing, making animalistic noises, still using the sharp weapon on John. And that's not even the worst part, because he is biting into John's face like an animal. Police could hear flesh ripping. He's tearing off his skin. He's eating his face, and police are not able to pull Austin off of him. The taser was not working on him. It was working, just not on Austin. They tried for so long to get him off of John. The cops couldn't physically pull him away. The taser wasn't working, so they released the police dog to go after Austin. Austin just fought off the dog off of him. Officers that responded to that night wrote down in their report that Austin was showing superhuman strength. And once they were finally able to get him in handcuffs, Austin looks at one of the officers and says, help me, I ate something bad. They ask him, what did you eat? And he says, humans. John and Michelle were pronounced no longer alive at the scene. They passed away in the most tragic way possible, and their loved ones were absolutely heartbroken. They were shattered by what happened, not only because it was so horrific, but because it was so unexpected. Their night had started off normal, and it ended in the worst possible way. Luckily, the neighbor Jeff was okay. He suffered terrible injuries, but he did live. Austin Haroof was immediately arrested and taken into hospital. He had awful injuries as well. Partly from drinking the bleach, his throat and his internal organs were all burnt severely. He had cuts all over him. He had cuts on his tongue. He had human flesh between his teeth. So many blood clots, internal injuries. He was in bad shape. And immediately when he showed up to the hospital, doctors were, it wasn't even a question. It was like, okay, this guy took some sort of substance, but they tested his blood. He had not a single trace of a single substance in his system. There was absolutely nothing found in his system, which I think is the craziest part about it all. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder with psychotic features, but I still have so many questions. 2 months after, he was charged with the murder of Michelle and John and the attempted of Jeff. And it is important to note that throughout this whole situation, his family and friends, specifically his mom and his sister, were trying to help him. Obviously, they noticed that something was severely wrong. Also, keep in mind, this entire thing happened in one summer. It happened really fast. His little sister offered to go to therapy with him. His mom was trying to get him into therapy, but his behavior was changing so rapidly, and he was so back and forth that their efforts to help him were not successful. Austin Haroof remembers bits and pieces from the night, but for parts of it, he says that he just completely has no memory of it whatsoever. He does say that he remembers biting Michelle's face, and he says that he remembers thinking that he was a dog when he did so, but he has no memory of biting John's face, but we know that he did because that's how he was found. Austin Haroof pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, and it was an agreement made by the prosecution and the defense that Austin needed to be sent to a secure mental hospital until doctors and a judge agree that he is no longer dangerous. The latest update that I could find was from 2023 that he was in a mental hospital and he was to stay there for an indefinite period of time. I couldn't find any other updates, but I wanted to make this video again because I just think this is such an important conversation to be had, especially because of the mental health aspect of it and how important it is to take care of yourselves and pay attention to the people around you. Obviously, no one could have predicted that this was gonna happen, but yeah. That is all I have for today's video. Let me know what you guys think. I'm gonna be in the comment section probably all night, but I wanna hear what your thoughts are on this case. And I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the foreheads at every single one of you.
This is the story of Tyrone Cade. March 26, 2011, Tyrone decides to plant a tape recorder in his girlfriend's home because she didn't want to be with him no more. She was very vocal about it. The two have not been intimate in months. She wanted Tyrone to get out, but Tyrone said he wasn't going anywhere. That same night, he decides to go to the strip club with his cousin. He returned after 12 a.m. and he returned his girlfriend, 37-year-old Michelle Fuller, was asleep. So Tyrone decides to check the tape recorder. And what he hears was Michelle having a little freaky conversation with her ex-husband on Skype. Tyrone got in the bed and tried to forget about the conversation, but he tossed and turned. So he decided to wake Michelle up to confront her about the conversation. But he didn't wake her up like a normal person would to have a conversation. He woke her up at knife point. When Michelle woke up and seen the knife, she instantly started screaming, and rightfully so. He's steady trying to ask her questions about the conversation, but he can't get anything out of her. So he started stabbing Michelle, and that's when she yelled for her 18-year-old daughter, Desire Hoskins. She came in and tried to help her mother, but Tyrone started stabbing her as well. After he killed the two women, he went around the house and took the pictures out of the frames and burned them. Then he went to his baby mother's house and told her everything. 16 hours after the murder, she took him to a Irvington police station. It was there where he confessed. He said he snapped in a fit of rage. He even confessed that he sexually assaulted Michelle that same night. At the end of his interrogation, he's crying and sobbing, asking the investigators, how quickly can we get this over? I am ready to die. I want to get this over with. I want the death penalty. But a year later, September 2012, when his trial started, he pleads insanity. During the trial, two unnamed women testified against Tyrone. One woman stated during the early 90s, Tyrone stalked her after she broke up with him. He would show up to her house. He would follow her. He would call her from all kind of different pay phones, but he eventually stopped. The other woman stated she met Tyrone at a laundromat. The two had just became cool. They had never dated, and there was never no sexual encounter. So she felt comfortable inviting him out for drinks with her and her coworkers. After drinks, she showed Tyrone her new apartment. After she showed him the apartment, she told him, I'm about to go see my boyfriend. And when she tried to leave the apartment, that's when he sexually assaulted her. He went to court for this in 2002 and ended up getting 3 years probation, violated that probation in 2003 and ended up serving 3 years in prison. And when he got out, of course, you have to register as a sex offender. And when he met and moved in with Michelle, he used her address. And somewhere along that line, she found out that he was a sex offender. And that's why she wanted to leave his ass and she wanted his ass to get out. Also during the trial, Michelle's mother testified that Michelle took her kids to Disney World in Florida, and that's where she ran into her ex-husband. And they were trying to rekindle their relationship. And all this happened just a week prior to the murders. Michelle has a son too. Her mother also testified that the kids were afraid of Tyrone. Desire even heard him say that he will burn this whole house down while in an argument with her mother. It's safe to say that his insanity plea did not work. On September 6, 2012, Tyrone Cade was sentenced to death. He got his wish. But he's still on death row as of today. So what's taking so long? Get him out of here!
This mother left her daughter to die alone while she went out on his 6-day bender. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the case of Verfi Coody. 17-year-old Verfi and her 20-month-old daughter Asia lived together in a flat in Brighton. The block of flats that they lived in was run by the YMCA as supported housing for young families. Despite outwardly appearing as a good mother, Verfi didn't let her responsibilities as a mother overtake her social life, and so in the run-up to her 18th birthday, she and her friends all got together and began planning a really big celebration, Verfi having no consideration into her childcare. On the 5th of December, Verfi would leave her flat in Brighton and travel to London to be with her boyfriend to begin the celebrations, leaving Asia behind at home alone. Leaving Asia was something that Verfi would actually do pretty regularly. Prior to this, she had left Asia home alone at least 5 other times. One of these instances was when Verfi left Asia for 2 full days so that she could go to a friend's birthday party. Again, Asia is 20 months old. She was so used to being left alone that experts believed that Asia would no longer even cry out for help or cry out for a mom because no one ever came to comfort her. How heartbreaking is that for Asia to have learned that before she's even 2-year-old? On the 7th/8th of December, Verfi was in a nightclub in southeast London where she stayed out partying till 4 in the morning and got a birthday shout out from the DJ. On the 9th, she travelled up to Coventry, now 150 miles away from her daughter, who was still all alone in Brighton. And Verfi didn't care, she continued to party some more. On this day, Verfi actually texted her own mother asking her if she could borrow some money. She told her mum that she needed some more money for some food and to top up her gas meter, but that was a lie. This money was instead going to be spent on alcohol. Verfi's mother had no idea that she had left Asia at home by herself and was using this money to buy more alcohol. Almost 6 days later, Verfi finally returns home to the flat. She spends around about 3 hours inside the flat doing God knows what up until 6:10 p.m. when she finally rings 999, telling the operator that her daughter wasn't breathing. When the paramedics arrived, Verfi told them that Asia had been poorly for the past couple of days and that she had recently given her some Calpol. Paramedics would describe Verfi as incoherent, distressed and distraught. When they got to Asia, they would find that she was cold at the touch, unresponsive and had signs of rigor mortis. She would be rushed to the hospital where she would sadly be pronounced dead. Asia's post-mortem would show that she died from starvation, influenza, with signs of dehydration and severe nappy rash. Her cause of death was determined to be from neglect. After the YMCA heard about the news of Asia's death, they decided to do their own investigating, and that is when they reviewed the CCTV footage which showed them that Verfi had left Asia all alone for 6 days. Upon seeing this, they contacted the police. Verfi tried to lie to the police and told them that she was with Asia the entire time. However, it didn't take long for them to refute that. They had the CCTV evidence showing her leaving and not coming back for another 6 days. They were also able to use data from her phone showing that she was not in Brighton in those 6 days. At Lewes Crown Court, Verfi Coody admitted to manslaughter. On the 6th of August 2021, she was handed a sentence of 9 years imprisonment.
This is the story of Brittany Norwood. On the night of March 11th, 2011, 29-year-old Brittany and her manager, 30-year-old Jana Murray, were closing down the store they were working at. The two locked up and left around 9:45, but after the two separated, Brittany noticed that she forgot her bus pass, so she decides to call Jana and asked her if she can meet her back at the store so she can retrieve it. The two never left the store. The next morning, another manager comes to open up the store, but she noticed that the door is unlocked and slightly opened. When she pushed it open, she seen clothes everywhere. The store was in disarray. This is Lululemon, by the way. And she got frightened and she left back out. She seen a man standing in front of the Apple store waiting for it to open up, and she asked him for his help. And when he came in and searched the store, he heard moaning. That's when the two found Brittany tied at her hands and her feet, beaten and bloody. Jana Murray was found dead. Brittany was visibly shaking and crying. She was rushed to the hospital to get medical attention. That's where she was questioned. The police asked her what happened. She said 2 masked men came in after the two re-entered the store. She said her and Jana were beaten and sexually assaulted. The police immediately started investigating. Jana's car was found 3 blocks away, and Lululemon didn't have any cameras in or outside of the store, but Apple did. And on their camera, they caught 2 men with caps on right outside of the Lululemon's door. The 2 men were brought in for questioning, and they agreed, yes, this is us on this camera, but we work in the back of Lululemon at this restaurant. We just some bus boys. We do this every night. They was immediately cleared. The autopsy report comes back and Jana has 331 injuries to her body. She has been strangled. She had 107 defense wounds alone, but majority of her injuries were to her skull. She was beaten with a various amount of objects that came from a toolbox that actually belonged to Lululemon. This story is national news at this point. That means that tips are rolling in. A man at a local hardware store told investigators that he seen a homeless man that frequent the area who happened to be black with a white guy with a book bag, and they were by Lululemon at the time of the murder. When the police tracked the homeless man down, he just so happened to be at a hospital all beaten and bloodied up. The detective's like, what the hell done happened to you? He said that he was beat up by another homeless man. And then the cops noticed that the blood on him, it was just too fresh for him to have committed these murders. They decided to take his DNA anyway, and it came back not a match. So now they're back at square one. They decide to go back to the crime scene, and they like, something ain't looking right here. It's not even enough bloody footprints for it to have been 4 people in here. One of the footprints is a size 14. The other footprint is a very small woman size. Where are the rest of the footprints? So they decide to go back to Brittany's house. She's at home now. She's done checked out from the hospital, to interview her again to get some more clarification. She told the same story, but she added something. She told the investigators that one of the guys threw her on top of Brittany and said, and I quote, "You lucky you're cute. You're more fun to fuck with," unquote. So she believes that the reason why she wasn't killed is because she was cute. The detective then asked her, do Lululemon sell shoes? And Brittany said no, but they do keep 2 pair in the store for customers if they want to get measured or resized. At this point, the lead detective is not believing Brittany at all. He told his buddies, like, I think she did it. But the other police officers like, man, no, she looked for real victimized. The lead detective said, come on down to the station. Come on, give me some of that DNA, baby. Brittany went to the police station to give DNA, but she brought 2 of her siblings with her. They stayed with her while she gave DNA. But when she left, the siblings came back by themselves, and they told the detectives Brittany was holding back because she was scared of her assailants. The police called Brittany in for a 4th time, and her story changed yet again. This time she said the assailants forced her to find Jana's keys and move her car. And if you don't come back in 10 minutes, I'm going to kill you. The police like, all right, enough is enough. We know you lying. On top of the sexual assault results came back, and neither one of them were essayed. Brittany's brother, who came up there with her, is noticing something ain't right, and he asked the detectives, can I speak to my sister alone? And of course they're not alone. They're in an interrogation room, and he's heard asking her, did you do this? And Brittany says, I don't want to talk about this here. Brittany was charged with murder 7 days after the murder. So what really happened on the night of March 11th, 2011? Brittany and Jana was closing up Lululemon. See, Lululemon have a policy. You check my bag and I check your bag before we leave, because there was no cameras. When Jana checked Brittany's bag, she had a pair of $80 leggings in her bag. And Jana was threatening to call the higher ups to report it. When the 2 left, Brittany started thinking like, hey, I can't let her do that. Let me call her back. So she called her back and was like, I left my bus pass. Can you let me back in so I can get it? And when they re-entered the store, that's when Brittany attacked Jana. The attack was so brutal and loud, the employees at the Apple store can hear it through the wall. They can hear somebody say, please, God, no, somebody help me, etc., etc. But they just thought it was just 2 girls having a cat fight. They didn't call no authorities, no nothing. They just went home. After the attack, Brittany took those size 14 shoes and pressed them in Jana's blood to make it look like it was a man there. Then she tied herself up and waited till the morning. Brittany Norwood was sentenced to life without parole on January 26, 2012. And let me just mention, Brittany had a history of stealing. She got kicked out of college because she was stealing from her soccer teammates. Brittany is right where she should be.